Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the virtual breakfast sessions. I am Larry Sashin, your host. Uh, we have a great show for you today. We're going to be speaking about events and catering, and well, it's no longer beef, chicken, or fish. But before we start, I'd like to discuss and introduce you to the people who are going to be doing the majority of the speaking today. So, Charles, will you start?
Well, I'm Charles J. Drayton, the chef and owner of Exquisite Catering Cuisine.
And Phil?
How you doing? I'm Phil Frederick. I am a partner, CEO, and proprietor of Cush Kitchen and Acronym Investments. I can give you more about my resume. I worked in French and Spanish cuisine for the last 20 years prior to moving into cannabis.
Okay. So, and Fred, you're up there, but why don't you introduce yourself?
Good morning. I'm Fred Clashman. I'm the publisher and editor of Total Food Service. I'm looking forward to a great session.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So let's get into this. Remember about 15, 20 years ago, your cousin Stacy's wedding. And you were there and you were sitting at a table and a waiter came around and he had a piece of paper in his hand and he said, chicken, beef, or fish. And you were given a choice between rubber chicken, beef that was made about 4 hours ago, and fish, which was sort of like mystery fish. And it was, to say the least, it was a little bit sketchy, that choice, which is why they serve a lot of alcohol at weddings. So things have changed. Charles, why don't you enlighten people on how an event is planned today as opposed to back then, and the choices are no longer three, they're a myriad, I guess.
I think many clients no longer want that traditional wedding. They're more self-conscious of what their guests are going to want to eat, especially on the healthier side. We just recently got a wedding for June and immediately told me he doesn't want chicken franchise, they don't want penne latke, they don't want to do a buffet. Don't even approach them with that stuff. So we've found out by listening to the client, they're very into seafood boils. We're actually doing a seafood boil for a wedding.
Wow.
They want some of the sides to be quinoa and farro for the vegetarians and vegans that are in their audience. So they want to make sure they have some type of meal planned that they can eat. We just recently got another phone call for another wedding. Again, they don't want traditional food. They're looking for more of an upscale feel, but maybe the use of raviolis instead. So we're thinking about doing a short rib ravioli. Again, thinking about the vegetarians, vegans, pescatarians want a fish dish that's not a salmon and a tilapia, but more of maybe a flounder or a halibut, things along those lines.
So let me ask you a question while we're on that subject. What does this do to your kitchen? You can't do a fish boil 4 hours in advance. How does that affect your setup and everything that you do in the kitchen?
So being an off-premise caterer, we're going to prep that in the kitchen and have everything transported to the site. We're actually going to assemble stoves on site and actually cook everything in front of them to do a whole demonstration on how to do the seafood boil. And it's going to be actually a plated course. So we're plating that on site as well. Actually, they're pairing that with the Mexican corn too. So we're also doing Mexican corn in front of them as well to pair that with the seafood boil. That was all part of the client's vision of what they wanted their wedding to look like. So we're just transporting everything over there and actually bringing stoves as well as some ovens to make what the client wants happen.
So let me ask you a question. Let me switch this over to Phil. Phil, you add an extra ingredient into what you do, something that is sort of, well, in the 60s and 70s when I was in college, it was very common to cook with cannabis. But you're doing that now in public, out in the open. Tell me about how a party like that gets together and what you do in an event like that to make it special and safe?
Well, first off, the culture around what cannabis is in service in any regard has completely shifted from what you're talking about in the 60s and 70s, making brownies in your dorm room or something along those lines. CBD, THC, just hemp products in general have evolved. The market has evolved to a great degree. So yes, people do events where they have THC infusions and things, and that can be very dicey. There are a lot of legal restrictions to doing things like that. Plus there are the questions of how you dose someone and how you make sure that you don't overdose someone. This is traditionally something that Charles would encounter in alcohol service. And you have to be very concerned about how much you give to a person. But that being said, there are other types of cannabinoids out there that don't have the same psychotropic effects that people do want in their food for a myriad of other reasons. My mother, for example, she's 72. She comes from a generation that believed that you were going to become a communist if you consumed a cannabis product or something along those lines, right? But she consumes my product on a regular basis for CBD because her doctor told her that she needs to start consuming CBD for her joint pain and for inflammation. So a lot of people are are doing infusions for health beneficial reasons. They're not doing it because they want to have fun or anything like that. They understand that there are myriad beneficial effects to terpenes and cannabinoids that are out there that can be included in things. And as a result, because of the nature of CBD and some other cannabinoids in the United States, you can cater party with cannabinoids if you're using CBD stuff. There's no restrictions whatsoever that's in the United States. Well, there are as far as certain concentrations of chemicals and things like that, but you can use CBD products in a catering affair with abandon as much as you actually would like to do so. And it's a great way to showcase something to people that might otherwise be shy and not try something like that.
So Charles, talk about the process of planning an event now. I'm sure you don't have a checklist of what you do and people check it like they used to do at Leonard's of Long Island. You go in there's a place that has 4 or 5 events going at the same time. And basically it was, the customization was the color of the tablecloth.
Right. So the process for us is we get on a conference call with the potential client. We ask them what their vision of their party should look like. So whether the linen colors, whether we want a fantasy effect, basically what's in their head. And we try to make what's in their head to fruition for them when we conduct the party. As per my first example, we had a customer said they didn't want a traditional wedding. They didn't want traditional food of chicken franchise, penne alla vodka, and salmon, because that's what every other caterer kept throwing at them. They were very specific about what they wanted their party to look like. They wanted tan colors. They wanted to use china, as well as thinking out of the box where we do filet mignon and the seafood boil, the Mexican corn, which is the first time I've ever had anyone ask me for Mexican corn before, but you have to kind of adapt to what the client wants, and listening to the clients is what our first steps are. Right, take down notes and then ask a series of open-ended questions. How do you want your table to be set up? What do you want your tables to look like? What are your favorite foods? We kind of want to know what to incorporate into what we're doing to make that catering more personable for that client or that customer. What do your guests are looking for? We noticed that some guests, again, are vegetarian, vegans, and pescatarians, and people are more conscious to that fact and want to incorporate those foods into their party atmosphere, whether it be the hors d'oeuvres, the displays, or the main entree course. So we try to incorporate that vision into that. And we have no problem bringing in partners who can decorate the tables, or tent and table companies to come in and make sure that they have the proper linens and things like that. We just kind of want to make it all gel into one thing for a one-stop shop atmosphere.
Great. Phil, can you add to that?
Oh yeah, events were a huge part of what I did. I used to work for Let Us Entertain You Enterprises out of Chicago, and I worked a famous restaurant called Mona Amiga B. They have several locations in Chicago and Las Vegas. A lot of our partners that we did catering for were in the pharmaceutical industry. So we would do very large events, which would have a broad array of people coming in from different walks of lives. A lot of times they would be obviously doctors and things like that. But some of the things that you need to pay very close attention to with this, obviously cost analysis is something. The stuff that Charles is talking about is great if they can afford to pay for all these extra addendums. Sometimes you have to be a little more creative in trying to accommodate people and fitting within their budget. Another thing is allergens. You have to be very careful in the modern age with people being allergic to gluten, being allergic to peanuts. This is something that you can try to plan for. Sometimes if you have an event, they will say, I have an attendee who has this allergy, but you will inevitably run into situations where people show up to an event, no one knew that they had a very severe allergy, and you need to be adaptable. You need to be able to find a way to serve that person, even though everything else in the party happens to be contaminated. So these are things you need to really keep a close eye on. Now, Charles did allude to a couple of things that are new today that didn't really exist 15, 20 years ago. One of those is vegetarian options or just dietary options in general. These need to be delicious. It's not an afterthought like it used to be, where you could just have a veggie platter on a menu where you just put some grilled vegetables on a thing and send it out. People will reject that, and they will not come back to you, and they will not think very highly of you for not putting thought into that vegetarian option and what you're going to give to them. But Charles is showing to a great degree what the real advantage of traditionally American chefs is, and that is versatility. We live and exist inside of a melting pot where we're going to run into seafood boils and Mexican street corn and any number of different things, from Tex-Mex to Korean to Chinese, all kinds of things. But American chefs have this level of exposure, whereas you won't find that in chefs in more unique sort of micro environments where they're very stuck in Italian food or whatever they're doing. So I really think what we're doing in the United States as far as this, especially since we have such an eclectic and demanding population, is really leading the forefront of what catering would be in the future as a result of this.
Okay,
Just to
go ahead, Charles.
piggyback on what Phil said. So he's correct. Us American chefs have to be versatile and be able to make every type of cuisine, between Mexican, Thai, Italian, whatever it may be. Some parties have a gambit of all these little different types of cuisine inside their events. Allergens are important. So one of the questions that we ask is, are there any allergies, things like that. But it's all about getting the details from the customer and client to make their party absolutely fantastic.
You know, I was on the phone last night with a PR person who specializes in cannabis, and he said to me that you guys are doing corporate events and cannabis at corporate events, and I said, how does that work out? Do you go back to work after? What's the story? How would you do something like that, Phil? Have a corporate event that would be on a weekend retreat, not a lunchtime, and then go back to work and singing and dancing?
Again, it's going to depend on the nature of the event, the nature of the cannabis product that you're using. Because some things, they don't affect you mentally in a mental capacity. And that could be what you're demonstrating to a company. If this was a situation where perhaps someone was trying to intake my product and put it onto a menu in a new state or something like that. So we did a corporate event for them to showcase it. It would perhaps be there to show them what the potential benefits are without affecting them. And they could return to work afterwards if they were having a CBD infused tincture on their food. Now, otherwise, if you were doing an event, say on the weekend, where you wanted to have something that was more fun and they were partaking of perhaps some THC product, my suggestions have and always been, use a product that the consumer can dose themselves. and give them the options to control their own dosage, because everyone has a different tolerance level. Everyone has a different reaction to cannabinoids. It's just a biochemistry thing. Some people are more tolerant and can handle things better than others. So you need to guide people through the process of dosing themselves, make sure that they take it very step by step if they don't understand, and go very slowly, and most likely arrange transportation for them afterwards, and have something that'll be safe for them. It's a corporate environment, and liability would be a huge issue, of course. So you need to make sure that everyone is safe at the end of the day.
So,
Larry,
you know,
Larry,
ahead,
hold on a
Fred.
second. Somebody just asked a question about the difference between infusing yourself via oil or condiment versus infusing during the cooking process. That could theoretically minimize liability, put responsibility on the individual guest. Is that an issue, Chef?
Yes, this kind of alludes to something that I was talking about there in infusing themselves versus infusing during the cooking process. Now, I'm going to step it back a little bit here. You do not want to infuse during the cooking process. You want to avoid doing this because cannabinoids break down at temperature. So when you get over 300 degrees, they become inert, essentially. They change nature and they don't do what they're supposed to do anymore. So when you infuse, you want to infuse after the cooking process at some point. So typically for our current product, we actually add it at the end. So after the product is prepared, you add it in there. That being said, if you're infusing someone else, it is extremely dangerous. And this is what I was kind of alluding to. You don't know what you're giving to someone and how they're going to react to it. So you are much, much safer and better off working in some kind of system where the consumer is essentially purchasing the product and infusing themselves. This will remove that liability. Then they are the ones who chose to dose themselves, and they are the ones who are liable for how much they gave to themselves. So cannabis is a very tricky situation when it comes to catering and event sites. It's still being navigated as to what can and cannot be done in any specific market across the board. There is no right or wrong answer. I think it is much more buyer beware than anything else. So if you are going to a cannabis event, it is your responsibility to take care of yourself. And I think as anyone who's going to cater, that's how you need to treat it. You're here, you understand your capabilities, what you can handle. You need to take care of how much you dose yourself. I think that's really the only way you can handle it at this point in time.
And it's interesting because if any event you go to, there's always the person that drinks too much. And if you put that little squeeze bottle of oil in front of them, those are the same people that are going to overdose. They're going to dose themselves too much on
True
cannabis.
enough. But if you were at an event and you were dosing people, that is akin to me pouring alcohol into somebody, right? Like instead of saying, here's options, you can have as much as you like, I'm actually saying you're going to take this much. And so if you went to a party and I made you drink 13 shots of whiskey, what would you be like at the end of that? It probably wouldn't go very well, right? But if you go to a party and say, somebody said Larry would know about drinking 13 shots of whiskey. But it's
My
the same
secret's
effect.
out.
But if you give people the ability to go in and have as much whiskey as they like, that's on them at that point. And then you have to have people that are trained in service that are going to be able to understand the steps of service and how much they're giving to people. So I think this is something that's going to come about, is how much have you given them? What is the right amount to give to a person? Just like a bartender having to cut a person off, you're going to have to do the same thing as a bud tender.
Okay, let's shift gears here for a little, and we could circle back later. Back in the olden days, you had a checklist and you knew exactly, everything was, this is this, this is this. And it was a formula on how you're putting things together. Now when everything is freestyle, let's go into the economics of putting together an event. That event you were talking about, Charles, that you know earlier in, how many people at that event?
It would be 45 people.
For 45 people. And I just heard somebody planning a wedding, and I haven't planned anything like that in many, many years. And there was sticker shock. She was talking about 300 people in an event at $350 a plate. And wow, let's talk about pricing events like this. What are we talking about for these customized events that the two of you are doing?
Customized events can range, on our part, depending on what choices they pick and what we discuss, can range from $90 a person to $300 a person. It all depends on what they choose to have. On our end, the size of a half tray and full tray are always the same. Counting how many pieces are needed for an event is the same. So basically, we do have a barometer to go by when we start pricing things like this out. Half tray is going to hold about 5 pounds worth of food. A full tray is going to hold about 10 pounds, close to 10 pounds worth of food, depending on what you want and how we cut and prepare something and place that in that tray. We're doing a buffet. Sit down dinners are, again, we know chicken's going to cost a certain amount and the condiments going to cost a certain amount. But depending on the labor, the food, that's how we kind of incorporate the pricing. We generally ask customers, what their budget is. So we can basically kind of gear them to the right direction because we have many people that want to have 100 people, but they're on a $30 budget. And we said we can't do both. Either you cut down the amount of people that you are attending, or you increase your budget to fit that need that you want. We can't serve you filet mignon for $20 a person, but we can give you flank steak for $20 a person. So we kind of mix and match certain items to kind of fit their price point in a whole, and kind of guide them through that whole process of swapping beef items out, chicken items out, depending on how long it takes on labor and prep and everything else to kind of fit their budget concerns.
Okay. And what about you, Phil?
Budget, as far as budget goes, now catering, when I normally did it, we typically did it in a location. So offsite catering wasn't typically something I did a great deal. Doing it on location, I also had the benefit of running multiple restaurants at the same time, which meant that I already had full cost analysis for a really large swath of different products available. So that, just like what he's saying, is I always had the ability to say, hey, that's not fitting in your budget. What can we switch out? How can we accommodate what you're doing? You're generally doing everything you can to a person up to a point. You're going to contour to what they're able to spend for an event. Now, if you're going into cannabis events, you're talking about something that might be at a premium. There's probably a lot more that goes into it as far as regulation and research and arrangements that need to be made ahead of time. So you could probably add on, another $50 to $100 per person for infusion, if not more.
Okay, and we're going to go.
Guys,
I'm going to pipe in.
Oh, Larry, I have a question.
Go ahead.
How much business was backed up from the pandemic? And so when people came to you, they came to you with budgets that were circa 2019, 2020. And then you faced inflationary prices to buy what you need to buy 3 years later. How much of that has created a conflict? And how do you work through that?
Last year, there were tremendous backup parties. You okay?
I can hear.
Last year, there was a lot of parties because many of the caterers were no longer taking catering events because they had the weddings that they had to do. We got a lot of that overflow. But they either received refunds back or did not. So we had an influx of weddings here put together for these customers. So saying that there were probably most caterers that had weddings in 2021 they couldn't do in 2020. We're actually catering them last year, and you say there was a backlog of 50, 60 was caterer. They were backlogged. And we got the overflow. They got a refund or another site. Sometimes they told us to kind of accommodate. It's hard to find caterers that were able to do their events last year. This year, most of those caterers are done, so now this is all brand new, like 2024. But the backlog was real, and inflation, especially in the beginning of the spring, chicken was not the case for your standard commodity chicken. It was hard to kind of match that pricing or come close to that pricing. You kind of had to massage things in other areas to accommodate.
Okay.
Got it.
So let me ask you a question, and this is one of Fred's favorites. He asks it every time, and I'm surprised he hasn't asked it so far. What does the high cost of labor, how is that affecting events and how many people you put on in a certain budget?
I don't know if there's an add-on to it about high cost of labor.
Okay.
I still can't hear you. I'm sorry.
All right. I asked
You're talking about the high cost of labor. For
in
me,
the event. Yeah.
we are more of a la carte thing, so we kind of pass that expense on to the customer of what to charge. From 10 years ago to now, it's probably, at least a $10 to $12 increase per hour for the cost of labor to do a off-premise event now. Used to be able to pay waitresses, $10 an hour, up to 25, 30 for an hour, depending on the event. Bringing in cooks range from 30 to, $60, $70 an hour, depending on what they're doing. Compared to 10 years ago, average price was about 15. So yes, the cost of labor is there. Our thing is more the cost of food and inflationary price and the increased price of food nowadays, where we're finding that people say they understand because they go to the grocery store and know how much they pay now at the grocery store, when last year they paid $100 and now it's almost double to feed the same size family. They don't understand us restaurant owners or caterers are going through the same thing. So we can't do that $19.99 per person party anymore. Now maybe our lowest price is $24 because we have to pass on that cost, or we're gonna go out of business if we don't pass on the cost, which many mom and pops don't. Establishments don't pass on the cost because they're afraid of losing customers and clients.
But the answer also includes the fact that there is no permanent staffing. It's all done with temp staffing in order to make it work.
I can't hear anybody. I don't know what's going on with your voice.
Can you hear me, Charles? I don't understand. Maybe it's Charles.
Larry, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay.
How about you, Phil? Can you hear us?
Yeah, it seems it might be
Charles, you got an internet
Okay.
issue there. So, so Phil, can you answer Fred's question there?
I would guess that Charles probably has a staff that he's bringing in. What's going on is he's adjusting their schedules based on business, and they might be seasonal. I would probably say that because usually when it comes to catering business, it's going to come in the spring and the summer, and then it's going to drop off during certain seasons. So what you wind up doing is you have a staff that's kind of always on staff, and then you have your people that you hire in seasonally. Maybe you bring them in the spring and you let them go at the end of summer. Maybe they are people that will work for you in the spring and summer, and then they relocate. I have seen this before where people will work in Chicago in the summer and then they'll move down to Miami
Florida.
and work down there in the wintertime for things. So usually it's seasonal, but these temp services, not a good option for culinary stuff. You need people. One, it's hard to find good cooks out there. This is a modern age where people were brought up thinking that tech was going to be the future, and a lot of people don't work with their hands anymore like they used to. So there's a lot more people that are out there working with computers and not learning the skills that it takes to work in the kitchen. So what you can find is something that you want to hold on to. And when you come to temp agencies, you're probably not going to find the best talent, because the best cooks are generally going to be taken by restaurants. They're going to want steady work. They're not going to be out there just kind of taking whatever comes into their laps.
Okay. I've just brought somebody in from the audience that I'd like him. Yvonne, turn on your camera, please. And when he comes in. So Charles, do you want to finish your, oh, there's Yvonne.
Hi, good morning.
Hi, Yvonne. Yvonne does catering out of Forest Hills. He does have a location that he works out of. You've been listening to what's going on here, Yvonne. How is this similar or different than what you're doing in Forest Hills?
It's all very similar. I mean, but the big difference is that I don't want to say we don't do off-premise, but I prefer not to do off-premise catering. For us, we just find that it's honestly easier to do it in our venue. Staffing can be an issue, but if you get consistent enough that you have events all the time, like we have events basically Friday through Sunday. There's a new, I guess there's a new schedule in New York in particular, where people are working longer hours, less days in restaurants. So instead of working, the 5-6 days that people were working, now they're working 4 days, but they're staying at work, 12 hours plus. So they actually have more days off, which gives us the ability to have a couple of extra people because they're still around. We do use temp agencies. Temp agencies tend to be a little bit more expensive. The quality of work or worker definitely is not up there. But it's a little bit of mix and match. You take some temp when you can. You constantly, hopefully you build up a good enough, I guess, resource and network that people will always reach out. Cooks always need work. They're always moving around. They always want extra money. They always want extra shifts. So if you have enough people on your Rolodex, you just post and say, I need some cooks for this weekend. You'll get 1, 2, 3 people. Problem is the money that sometimes that they want. Sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's not that much, and it's okay. And sometimes like temp agencies will end up paying $45 an hour for a cook last minute. It's a lot.
Okay. So Charles, I'm going to pose a question, and this will be actually the start of our wrap up. This is just blown by. If you were speaking to a potential event, a family or 2 people that want a wedding, what are the things that they should know and think about before they meet you?
Have a budget in mind, what your max spend is. To be realistic of what your choices are and the amount of people that you are invited. So that's the big thing for me. When someone asks what your budget is, please give them an answer, because it makes life a lot easier for your caterer to kind of guide you into the right direction. Secondly, yes, you want to appease your guests, but the party is about you and what you want. So put yourself first, but yet accommodate slightly the guests that you are arriving, because if you try to accommodate everybody, your food list and the wants just become astronomically big. And it's a little harder to kind of corral all that in to be accommodating to fit your needs. And again, the wedding is about you, your partner, about what you want it to look like for the next 20, 30 years when you look back on that. So always put that first.
Okay, let's get this straight. I know you said it's about you two. It is not about you two. It's about the bride and the guy
Right.
who comes with her.
Exactly.
We've all been there.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I feel like a lot of people want to say, oh, my guests won't like this, my guests like that. But
Right.
again, the wedding is about you and your future husband. Put yourselves first, and then everything else we can kind of blend into it.
That I buy into. That I buy into.
Yeah.
So Phil, what about you?
Could you repeat the question for me?
The question is, somebody wants to plan an event, whether it be a couple, a single person. What should they know? What should they have in mind before they come to you to plan this event?
Well, I mean, first they should know that I currently work in the cannabis realm for the most part, so that would probably be helpful. If you're going for an event, now I'm going to steer away from weddings for a little bit because we've talked a lot about weddings, but there are a lot of other kinds of events out there. So I think you should know what your objectives are in your events. Let's talk about corporate events, perhaps. What are you trying to do with your corporate event? Are you trying to engage new investors? Are you trying to thank your staff for the wonderful jobs that they've done over the course of the year? Are you, anything like that? So, what I would like you to do is have an open mind about what you're going to be looking for, and maybe come in because chefs are talented. Chefs are artists, right? Let them have a canvas to paint inside of. I think ideally in a situation, yeah, you can come in and say, this is what I really want. And that's how weddings go. Like the bride really wants things a certain way. But a lot of times you'll get event coordinators that are doing recurring events where we do events for our company every month and we want to do one with you this time here. What do you have for us that's interesting? So what they should come to us with is an open mind and a willingness to hear about things like experiential catering, neo-Nordic cuisine, mocktails, the return of buffets, CBD infusions, all kinds of new and interesting things, I think is a different way to kind of approach how you're going to set up your catering event.
Okay, thank you. Yvonne.
All right, so I just wanted to, is my mic on? Yeah, okay.
Yes.
I just wanted to mention one thing, just about all events. I think that the most popular thing or the biggest trend that I've been seeing lately is people want less formal sit down, like plated dinners. So what we've done, and kind of to mention like the seafood boil, that's kind of what people want. People want fun, interactive, like food stations. They want, something that's engaging, something that's very like cinematically fun. They need something they want to take the picture of. Exactly. They want something. They want to pull a strawberry from like the spoon on the wall. I just recently saw like it was a green wall with a bell and it said ring for champagne. And you rang the bell and hands with white gloves came through the green wall with glasses of champagne. It's just champagne. It's not a mocktail. It's not, but this interactive experience made it very fun. And I think that's what really, like, what people are looking for in events, weddings, anything right now. They want that interactive, experiential kind of fun experience.
Okay, one other thing, Yvonne. Now that we're leaving soon, would you please tell everybody who you are?
My name is Yvonne Lemoine, and I own Kin Hospitality and My Kitchen events in Forest Hills.
Okay, thanks. Fred, what do you have to say?
I think the one thing that strikes you is within the creative process, does the customer generate the creative process, or does the chef and the caterer generate the creative process? And in a marketplace that's full of many event planners, et cetera, I wonder what the best way as a caterer is to sell and market what you do.
Okay.
In other words, go ahead.
Go ahead, Charles. Why don't you answer that? Who takes control?
It's a combination. It's more of the chef that takes control by, again, asking those open-ended questions to find out what they want. And then we kind of use our creative talent to make that happen. Again, go back to the seafood boil. We know they wanted that. We know they wanted demonstration. I'm going to speak about everything that I add to that pot to give them that interactive, as the other gentleman said, give them that kind of that feel that they're a part of the whole demonstration. Charcuterie boards and how we kind of design it and decorate it based on what they say. So it's the kind of chef listening to the client, but putting their archery, their talent, what they do best, and making kind of happen for that customer by giving those ideas. So we kind of start throwing those ideas so they start thinking and saying, yeah, we like that. We do love, we love that idea. Let's make that happen. Again, with the champagne going through that green screen, the chef probably said, hey, how about we do that? and they just bid on it and said absolutely, because that was probably in his head to begin with when he did his background check on the client.
Okay. Phil.
I mean, obviously, it's going to depend on the nature of the event itself. You know, a bride's going to come in with a very clear picture in her mind of what she thought her wedding was going to look like. However, a event director for, you know, Pfizer is going to come in and say, what do you guys do? And what can we get for X amount of dollars? So, Charles is absolutely right. Anybody who works as a quote unquote artist or craftsman, let's put it this way. If you go to an artist and say, make art for me, they're not going to know what to do, right? You need to give an artist a canvas. So they have to have a framework to work inside of. So if you give that same artist a room and say, I want this wall to be a colorful mural, they will come up with something that's going to knock your socks off. So it's both. It's yin and yang. You know, your event is going to come to you and say, this is the framework that we're looking for. And that is the canvas in which a chef would paint, I think, or a catering company would paint.
Yvonne.
Hold on a second.
Yeah, I
guess
agree.
Hold on a second. So
Yeah.
Can the wow factor take you to a different budget level?
Oh, absolutely.
Or
Yeah.
If you're doing it right, you're going to be like, yeah, that would be,
Absolutely.
what you're talking about would be awesome.
Right.
But
okay,
if we
so
did
that's
this,
what I'm getting at.
you would
That's
blow
what I'm
away
asking.
your guests and they're going to
Right.
invest more money or whatever like that.
That's
That's your
what I'm asking.
upsell opportunity.
That's what I'm asking.
The wow factor is definitely part of that budget. If they really want to wow, it's going to cost them.
Yeah, but you know, before Yvonne goes, I just want to say something. This is the same thing that any business has to face. It is under promise and over deliver. If a bride who's been thinking about her wedding since she's 6 comes in and starts talking to you about what she wants and what she wants, you can't tell her you do it unless they have the pocketbook to match. Because what's going to happen is you're going to, no matter how great you pull everything off, it's going to be a disappointment. So you have to be, in your job, you have to be part psychologist on how do you weave reality into somebody's expectations. Otherwise, no matter what you do, you're going to fail. You're going to fail. Yvonne, jump in on this.
Yeah.
Hold on, Larry. Hold on.
Okay.
Hold on. I disagree with you vehemently on that, because how are you going at the same time you're competing with other caterers for this piece of business.
Yeah.
So if you don't put something forward that's extremely creative and you sit there and try to figure out how much somebody has in their pocket, you're not going to get the business.
Okay, so tell me how do you bridge reality and creativity?
Okay. Guys, how do you find your way there?
It's, I mean, I can
Again, it's
answer.
about-
There's, yeah.
Go ahead.
Hey, let Yvonne answer.
All right. So there was a lot of questions and a lot of points that were brought up. And giving somebody the reality of what their budget can really make come to fruition is sometimes difficult, but it really is a conversation. You know, you sit down with the guests, like, you know, you have a base budget of what it is that you need to, I guess, make to book the day, right? And you have that in mind, and, you know, you tell the guests, listen, you know, we can only do events. It's a minimum of 50 people. You know, this day is very coveted, whatever it is. And it really comes down to like a couple of different creativities, because a lot of people just book this space. Like they fell in love with this, you know, this space itself, and they don't care as much about the food or the, you know, it's the space that sells it. Whatever you do after that is obviously going to be icing on the cake. But it really is a conversation. The upsell stratosphere of what you can incorporate into an event is endless. Like you can have an event that is millions of dollars if you want it to bring in big production, big light, you know, big performance. Like you can have an event that's over the top and incredible, and you can hire the right talent and the right companies that will help you bring this to fruition. You can have extreme crazy floral like decor that will cost you, you know, a small house. But it's a conversation with the guests. And I think we've seen a trend also in smaller, better weddings rather than large simpler or more cookie cutter weddings. People want to have less people. They're like, you know what? I don't need 200 people to show up at my wedding. I just have like 50 friends and family and coworkers. That's enough. But that gives me a better budget to have that over the top, really awesome wedding, because now I'm not paying for, Uncle Larry's cousin's nephew that comes because I went to school with him, back in 2005 or whatever. Like, I don't need to do that. So it really is a conversation of like bringing the thought or the beauty of something that you've always dreamt about to life and keeping within your budget. So yeah.
Okay, Charles,
my
you're going to
thoughts.
add to that?
Yeah, smaller parties are kind of what's in and trending now compared to the larger parties. And again, with the budget they have in mind and how you kind of get to that point of explaining to them what can and cannot be done, it's kind of where you kind of gear them towards and give them ideas and examples of how to do that, food-wise and decor-wise, the proper tablecloths, whether or not they use China or, what we use a lot of is plasticware that looks like real plasticware for off-premise catering. It has a feel and look of real China, but it kind of takes down that price point than you China and have to have labor involved in cleaning all those plates and stuff. So it's kind of mixing and matching different products based on what they can and cannot do to kind of get them there to a catered event, whether it's a wedding or a simple gender reveal party, which is extremely popular. We do a amount of those now, where there are different themes and concepts and balloons that we have to pop to show, it's blue or pink. Kind of put that all together for them.
Okay. It goes back. Chefs are artists. They have a craft that they can paint beautiful pictures with what they do. But a successful chef is also a salesperson. And instead of when somebody gives you a limited budget, and this is where Fred and I disagree, I think that the artistic chef can then go fantastic. And they can draw a picture, raising up what they can do in that budget so it sounds like it meets their expectations. I was taught very early on in my sales career when I was selling pots and pans door to door as a teenager to hold the pot like it was the crown jewels. If you hold it by the handle and wave it in front of them, everybody's going to, oh, it's a pot. But if you hold it like it's the crown jewels, people think it has value. So it is all according to how you present this. When you see their budget, you see their vision on whether they're going to move with you, because when it comes down to it, they're buying you and what you can do. And please tell me I'm wrong. It's if you're a chef and it looks like you haven't eaten in 3 years, I don't know who's going to hire you. But if you have that bravado and that confidence, it's the confidence that you have in you that spills over to them. Any final comments before we go?
Larry, just to kind of piggyback on what you said, you're right. We can manipulate the food and the atmosphere around any type of budget. The downside is the amount of people that they want to attend could change that. So if they want 100 people on a small budget, it's not going to happen. But if they lower the amount of people, I can make any budget work based on food, decor, things like that. So you are right in that instance.
Okay. Anybody else?
Just 2 points. They're relatively, one, I don't consider chefs to be artists. This is a semantic argument, but I believe that chefs are craftsmen, and this is what lends to your point. Artists are someone who produces something that is not essential to existence in a physical way, whereas chefs work with something that is essential to existence. You have to eat, right? So it is a necessity that we work to develop into something that is an art form to a certain degree. I have seen food as art. There is such a thing out there, but I think chefs have to live in a more pragmatic world. And that is ultimately what it is. I do not agree with the idea that it is a competitive market and you have to do anything and bend over backwards and basically destroy your own business just to accommodate an individual customer. Those customers are going to find out that catering is extremely hard. The ones who do it well are few and far between. So you can go out and you can find a lot of catering companies. I bet you don't find a lot of good catering companies. So you're going to find out, and I bet you Charles and Yvonne probably get a lot of their business through referral. They're probably getting,
Yeah.
hey, I went to an event that these guys hosted and
Yep.
they did a good job, so I want to do it with them. They're both
Dude, like
nodding, right?
75% of our business. Yeah.
Right. So if I come
we're
to
about to
you
say
as a
that.
customer and I say, I want to spend X amount of dollars, this is what I'm doing, I'm going to respect your opinion, and hey, that's probably not going to be possible. You know,
Yeah.
you're going to get unreasonable customers, and those are the ones you're going to push away at the end of the day, especially if you're like Yvonne and you got your event space and it's already going to be booked a lot of the time anyway.
Yeah.
Maybe I don't need your business if you're going to be trying to gouge me. And essentially, if it's not profitable, why am I doing this? This
Yeah,
is a business.
exactly.
I've got customers, I've got kids to feed, I got a mortgage at home. You know, I may be an artist, but at the end of the day, if it's not good business, there's no point in doing it. Right. So we will work with you to a certain extent. But the old saying that we used to use in the restaurant is the customer is always right until they reach the point in which they become wrong. And then they need to be ejected. Because they're taking away from your business. They're taking away from the other customers that are in there that are being, good customers to you. They're ultimately costing you money by being a customer. That's all.
Hey, Yvonne, thank you.
Phil, I couldn't agree with you more. It's very, very true. And it's you at the end of the day, we're really selling the fairy tale, or at least in events. You don't gather a group of people and bring everyone together to celebrate something that's negative. Like, it's always celebration of love, life. It's a joyous occasion. If people are coming in and they're, trying to nickel and dime you, you're very kind to them and you say, listen, this is what we can do. And unfortunately, if it's not the right, we're very, even to people that have done events with us before, they're like, listen, I don't really have the budget. We'll try to work with you. But at the end of the day, we're not going to be the right fit for everyone. And if we choose us, we'll be very happy, and we'll bend over backwards, and there's payment plans, there's different ways that we can kind of get to your dream. But you're absolutely right. Like, you just, like, that's why you have minimums, and you have, this is what we do. If it's not the right fit. And I think, having gone to a lot of weddings and a lot of different events, like you said, there are a ton of catering companies. We have an event space, and we've done catering for other event spaces. And then we don't want to do it because it's the event space, the way we see that it's being run, it speaks negatively to us. So I know that the food is not going to be taken care of. I know that they're not going to do things right. I know the service is not going to be great. So this is part of the reason I don't like to do things outside of our space. There's too many variables that I can't control, and you're relying on other people. But at the end of the day, when they're like, listen, this food is cold, the caterer sucks. You're like, no, it's not. We did our job. It's just, unfortunately, these other factors delayed your wedding for an hour and a half, and now things are, cold and stale, or whatever they might be. So yeah, we are partially artists in some way, but there is the craftsmanship of, we have to execute and make delicious food that people ingest. But yeah, to wrap it up, we're here to celebrate life, love, and joyous occasions, man. That's it.
Great. Thank you, Yvonne. Fred, what do you have to say?
Fabulous session. I think, Larry, it's what you and I have been struggling with all year, which is, what comes first? Do you have an understanding of whether what you're creating as a caterer or restaurant is profitable? And how can you create products? How can you create solutions that are profitable, that are also creative, et cetera? And I think it continues to be the challenge.
Okay. Thank you. And geez, Charles, Phil, Yvonne, thank you for taking time and helping us out with this. This has been, I mean, I wish we had hours to talk about this because the subject just keep on going. Everybody in the audience, thank you for taking time to spend with us. I know some of you would rather see other things than my face first thing in the morning, but I really appreciate you coming out and spending time with us. Please come back in 2 weeks. We're going to be doing something that if you read papers here and there, you read about food safety and the lack of it some places. So we're going to be talking about food safety and is it part of your regular menu? So I hope to see you back here in 2 weeks. For those who came out today, once again, thank you. And all I have to say is, everybody, stay positive, test negative.
Thank you,
Bye,
guys.
folks.
Thank you.
Hey, y'all.